So today we're talking about service to others and beliefs. That's what the bowl gave us to discuss.
All right, that's what you pulled out of the hat.
Yeah. Service to others and beliefs. I mean, this is a lot. I mean, beliefs on their own is a whole topic. Service to others, that's a major one too. So, I mean, I guess we should start by defining what we believe service to others and beliefs means. I mean, my interpretation of service to others is putting others first and being able to help people at various levels, whether it's emotionally, physically, all that stuff. But it's really about helping others and putting others first. I kind of put that in quotation marks because we'll probably go down that road.
Yes.
And, you know, I've read quite a few religious literatures, and it's always about service to others. You know, how can you serve others in the world? That's really kind of one of the biggest meaning and purposes to life, is being of service to others.
Of course.
So, beliefs as well. I mean, that's a huge one. Beliefs are really, it's how you're hardwired, and you usually acquire all those beliefs at a very young age. And they're kind of statements that, almost value statements that are programmed within you. So, you know, basic ones that most people are familiar with are, you have to work hard for money, or things don't come easy. Those are all belief systems that I think people have hardwired without even realizing it.
No, absolutely. I like my old mentors always say, you know, belief is kind of funny because if you look at the middle of it, the word is lie. So if you tell yourself a lie long enough, it can eventually become a belief or a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yes, some of those things that we've been told at a very young age, we tend to hold on to so dearly, tightly, becomes a belief of who we are. But then sometimes you question those beliefs and say, is this really serving me, right? And the same go to change your beliefs, right? My mentors used to always say, write down that lie or that statement. And then if you start embodying that, you can start changing who you are. Like I had to do that with me when I was younger. I didn't have a lot of confidence. I wasn't really sure like how to go about communicating with people. And I started journaling about that and writing down like, I am very calm and confident. I'm very calm and confident. And I kept telling myself that even though I didn't feel it right away, eventually I started embodying that. And now that's a belief I hold true when things get chaotic. I always had that at the top of my mind.
To reprogram it to
yourself. Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of go both ways, right?
Well, you kind of have to. But I mean, in terms of service to others, I think that's really important for people to kind of understand that. In my experience, and I think being a mom, that's where I really started to better understand what being of service to others meant. Now, that also set me back because I realized quite quickly that you really can't give from an empty cup.
Of course.
And so it was a matter of deciding, you know, taking care of myself. And it's that whole idea, we've talked about it, you put your mask on first in the airplane when it's going down, your oxygen mask first before you put that on of other people or your children. And I used to think that was absurd. Like, no, I put my children's masks on first. And then I quickly realized, like, I can't continue to give and be of service to others if I'm not being of service to myself. And I mean, that took me on a whole journey of even removing myself as a mother from my family to identify trauma and unresolved issues that I had. So then I could have, my cup could be filled, and then I had more to give to others. And that was like, that was a 5-year journey probably of realizing that I can't keep giving and put other people first. It's detrimental to myself, and it was detrimental to others because what I was giving them, it really was just, it didn't have value, didn't have substance. And I was giving from the wrong places. I was probably giving from ego because ego seems to always have a full cup. I wasn't giving from the goodness of who I was. So I had to learn how to be of service to myself, which for me meant dealing with unresolved trauma and working through a process of healing those wounds so then I could be whole again and then I can give to others.
Of course. And my whole life's kind of been through some of that in regards to service to others. I have always put people before me my whole entire life. I was a teacher, a trainer, a coach. I'm always trying to help people. I would say yes to everything. And then it wasn't until I was around 25, 26 when I had to learn a valuable lesson of boundaries. And I collapsed in my condo. I was exhausted. I was doing call after call, just kept working. I would, push myself to the side. I had to service all these people. I had 6,000 people working for me at one point. So I was always like trying to solve everyone else's stuff. And then finally my body got taken out. So now it's a little bit tougher, but I do, try my best to respect my boundaries, and I'll do things to make sure that I'm good so that I can provide the right service. Whether that's, taking time to do my meditation or working out or going for a walk with my dog and scheduling those things in so that I feel good, so that when I do give the service to others, I'm in the right place, the right state, and it doesn't come from that, that lack or limitation where I'm exhausted all the time just trying to solve the world's problems,
Well, that's it. And I mean, that's it. Like if your cup's empty, you really can't give. And we're told to always put others first, and we're not told to put ourselves first. And it's so detrimental if we're not taking care of our own wounds and we think that we have the capacity to take care of other people's wounds. It's really inauthentic and disingenuous because you're really putting other people first when you haven't even taken care of yourself. So it's almost like you're an imposter. You haven't even taken care of your wounds, but here you are trying to help others. And you mentioned a good point. Boundaries are huge in that, because unless you can start to identify your boundaries and say, you know what, no, this is my time for myself. This is where I need to fill my cup before filling others. And we're in worlds that we're bombarded and overstimulated with people's needs. I mean, as a mom, I have kids that are constantly at me. Even in business, you have clients that are always at you. And I've learned sometimes you have to say no, and you have to put yourself first. And it's a very hard thing to do if you've never learned how to say no. And that's where boundaries come in. And I think that that's also tied to beliefs, because I had certain beliefs, certain value statements about boundaries, that those are bad and those are wrong. And you always put others first. And a lot of people use that to manipulate, where it's like you're being selfish, put other people first. And it's like, well, wait a second, I need to put myself first. So there's a fine line, because I have had it used against me where it's like you're being selfish and you have to stop. I had to stop and think, like, am I being selfish? Well, maybe I need to be selfish.
Yes.
So it's been used against me. So unless, for me having integrity with those boundaries and knowing this is what needs to happen so that I could be a benefit to the people in my life, I have to put myself first. And there's a fine balance. And I think every day for me, I have to recalibrate.
Of course. And even to the other side of that too, like I remember one time I was working with Bob Proctor, I was going through like a dark depression time. And in that business, it was all service to others, right? That's what you have to do.
It's fair.
So like, sure, I had to say no to a lot of things, but then he did something with me, which was pretty profound. And it really helped change my mindset, was he goes, okay, in the next 30 days, I'm going to give you one of my clients. I'm like, oh man, I got to do your job. Like this person's paying you a lot of money. So like, I started to freak out. And he goes, no, you're going to serve and help this lady solve her problem. And then by doing so, that's going to start changing how you feel about yourself. Because at this point, you've burnt the candle at both ends. Now you're just kind of like blah. So maybe doing that. And you know what? Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, coaching this person overseas, solving her problems, I start feeling a little bit better. And then when I start feeling a bit better, then I can understand, okay, where is my limit of how much value can I provide somebody, and make sure that I don't burn out and be exhausted, because that's my weakness. I always say yes to everything. I'll do whatever I can to make things happen for other people. And then sometimes I'm like, man, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to, put the phone down and say, all right, I'm going to take a minute here, because I'm going to end up back in the hospital.
Well, it is. And that's the thing. It's emotionally and physically exhausting. And by the time you get to the physical exhaustion, you've already bypassed all the signs of being emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted, mentally exhausted. And now you're physically ill. And you have no choice but to address those issues. And I mean, service to others, that's a belief in itself, where people are programmed to believe you have to serve others before you serve yourself. That's a belief right there. And so that has to be rewired, and it's not easy. And I mean, belief systems, Dr. Bruce Lipton wrote a great book, The Biology of Beliefs. And it just talks about how you biologically program yourself with your beliefs. And so you start hardwiring yourself to go in certain directions, kind of like what we talked about last episode too. And so beliefs are really powerful, because every cell in your body starts to respond to that. And we have these little receptor cells, and they almost are only responsive to the beliefs that you've adopted. So when certain experiences come into your life and you have certain endorphins and hormones and neurochemicals that are released, your body can't even recognize them if they're outside of the scope of your belief system. And so your body's responding based on old paradigms. And until you shift that, and like it's really simple as being aware. And it's not an easy thing. So I have a 7-step system or 6-step system that I've kind of used forever. And it starts at the trigger. Because for me, as soon as you're triggered, that means that there's great stuff there. There's learning, but there's a belief system that's out of line. So you're trying to act in a certain way, or you're experiencing something, and usually triggers something that creates like an innate emotional change in you, usually negative.
Usually, yes.
And for most people,
being triggered usually is good reason.
Yeah, you're gonna be triggered in a negative way, and so that's a great piece, because that's where you start to pay attention, and it means there's something that's misaligned within you. And whether you address it immediately or later, for me, that always ties back to belief systems, because that's kind of like the foundation of what holds us back, where we go about life and then we don't get to the actual belief system that is literally like a law you have inside of you, right? And then so what I do is I identify the trigger. I talk about the current situation. So I'll journal it, and I'll describe the current situation as vividly as I can and as descriptive as I can. And then I remember of a past situation. And of course, as far back as you can go to your childhood, where you've had similar experiences and triggers, you recount that whole experience. So now you have your trigger, your current experience, your past experience. And then usually what comes out of that is an old belief system. And I've sat there some days writing out like 10 different belief systems. Like, again, you have to work hard for money and all these silly things that we were always told.
Of course.
That we then don't realize that we go about life and then we're triggered. And it's because there's something that's misaligned. And then once I go through the old beliefs, I ask a series of questions of whether or not I'm committed to keeping those old beliefs. And then if I'm ready to move on, I start to create new beliefs. And then there's the awareness and the action piece of saying, okay, what can I do now to implement these new beliefs in my life one day at a time? And it's a slow process of reprogramming yourself, but it's more sustainable than I think any other way, because it makes you go through the whole paradigm of where it started, how it's affecting you, and then what to do now.
No, absolutely. Even to kind of piggyback off of that, beliefs kind of like really shape a lot of people in terms of their decisions. Like I deal with people's beliefs all day because I'm in the fitness industry. So people come in and I have this belief, like, my ex had this belief, it was hilarious. She would only eat rice because she saw the show Survivor. Okay. And they were all skinny and they would eat rice.
Right.
So I'd see her just making rice. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm making rice. I'm like, you don't have anything with that? She goes, no, Survivor, they were skinny because they ate rice. I'm like, okay, I can't believe that. And it is a belief system, great. But if you don't do this and this and this, like, you're going to have problems in other areas. And she was like, oh, and she was just oblivious to it all. So sometimes people come to me with like a stuck in belief, and that kind of the way it is. And then you got to shift that paradigm and through questioning. So usually when I have somebody, when they come to me with a belief they're trying to question, I usually ask them this one question, like, how's that serving you? How's that working for you? If that belief is making you feel good and you're happy with the life you have and you're holding on to that, continue it. But if you're having this conversation with me, it's probably something that's, conflicting inside of you, that you're starting to question those beliefs. Even me, like I was, raised in a family, we weren't really wealthy all the time. There wasn't a lot of money around. And then I meet Bob Proctor from The Secret, right? So here I'm a high school teacher, living in a small little area. And then next week I'm on a private jet with a guy that's got a massive company traveling the world. So my paradigm and beliefs about life completely, I'm like, this is crazy. A year ago, going faster. Now I'm, flying over the world with this guy. And so during that, I had a lot of things battle. And he used to say, like, Chris, man, you got to, if I can go inside your brain and watch it or shake it.
Yeah.
And he goes, people are going to say to you that are brainwashing you. And he goes, sometimes you need a brainwash, though, if you really think about it. Your brain has been polluted with so many negative things or negative beliefs and negative ideas, either about yourself or your environment. And sometimes you need somebody to wake you up and give you a little shake there to show you that life can be a lot more abundant, a lot more exciting if you really challenge and question some of those values and beliefs that you're holding so closely. And so through that experience, I was able to catch a lot of those old ways of thinking, like, you got to work really hard or, to earn money.
You're fortunate you had someone there to call out your triggers.
If not, I would have been not in that situation. So sometimes, having a mentor or another person who's got eyes and ears in places you've never been could really start questioning and opening things up inside of you that you've never experienced before. And so now I try to do that with as many people as I can.
And you have to be open to it too, right? Like you were obviously open to it. So when Bob was like pointing triggers out, you weren't like,
well, at the beginning, I told him to F off.
Yeah.
Eventually, I had to come around to it.
But then you start to, you're like, okay, fine, I'll reprogram this one. And then you see the outcome and you're like, oh, it really does work. And I get, like, I was raised by immigrant Italians who were like, you have to start at the bottom, all these things. And you're like, and still to this day, if I have a conversation with my dad, he'll be like, well, you got to start at the, I'm like, what does that even mean? And I'm just like, that is such a demeaning. And I went through my whole life thinking, okay, I got to start at the bottom. So I'm looking for bottom dwelling situations to express and gain experience. And like, it never turned out well. No. And it was like, well, wait a second, maybe this doesn't serve me. And then I would get triggered for, in some cases where it was like, you're overqualified. Well, I can't be, I have to start at the bottom, right? So it would trigger me. And it is hard to sit there and say, okay, I need to go in. It's almost like rewiring your DNA where you have to reprogram it so that you have a better understanding of things, statements that are now aligned with who you are and who you want to be. And it's hard to continue to, I'm sure when Bob was reprogramming, you're like, okay, that makes sense, but it's so easy to falter back into the old paradigm because it's comfortable, it's certain.
Yeah.
You might fail, but you can count on the fact that you're going to fail, and it's predictable.
And it happened to me numerous times. Like I was with them for over 5 years, and there's times where business for me was going very, very good. And then all of a sudden, a year, terrible. And I'm with like one of the best coaches in the world. Like, how come my stuff? And he goes, it's your mind. It's your paradigm. It's not the actions you're doing. It's your belief system that's holding you back. You think that this has to be done this way. I'm showing you it doesn't. Like I came from the same thing. You got to work really hard and grind it. He's like, and In business, it's a little different than that, especially if you work for yourself, because you used to tell me your network can definitely attribute to your net worth, right? You need somebody who solves a problem for you that can fast track and do a result way quicker than you maybe grinding through the pain of not knowing, right? So that's why it's like people hire me for coaching, because I've seen everything that I touched in terms of the path they need to go, and I can give them the path of least resistance. Where if you're on your own, you could be grinding through that forever. Now, eventually you'll get there, but there's other ways of getting to your goals that you may not have seen before.
Yeah, and we've seen it with other programs such as like neuro-linguistic programming and things like that, that it kind of bypasses things and taps into the subconscious for you and finds those old beliefs. Whereas I think, for me, my process is, it's arduous because you're doing it yourself. You're digging out the dirt and gold on your own. And like there are days where I started crying when I was able to identify old beliefs. And even just like past experiences, going that far back and having that aha moment and saying, wow, this is where it all came from, and being able to release that and say, this is an old belief that I've been committed to this, and I thought it was serving me. And those are some of the questions I ask, is it still serving you? Like you said, you've asked yourself, because if it is, cool, keep it. But if it's not, you got to move on, because then you can't complain that you're having these experiences that aren't aligned with who you are, and you're not happy and you're triggered all the time. Well, there's a belief system in you that is saying, thou shalt do this to get this, but you're not getting this. So you have to reprogram that belief. And kind of going back to service of others, I mean, that was always a huge thing. Put others before you. And again, going back to my experience as a mom, no, your kids come before you. Your kids come before you. But at some point, you have no capacity left.
Yeah, I challenge that belief a lot. I've trained tons of moms in my career. And that's always come to that. I go, you're no good to anybody unless you're good to yourself. So what does that mean? I go, if you want to be there for your kids to play and interact and be a positive role model, if you're not taking care of your nutrition, your diet, your sleep, your lifestyle, your stress, when you are present for those children, you're not really there. You're there, but you're not. And you still may say things and do things and out of spite. You don't know why you're upset or angry in those moments. Well, you're not taking care of yourself. And if you don't do that, also you're not going to show that example to your children.
I was going to say, then you're programming your kids.
They're going to look at that like, hey, that's how life is. Then it's not.
No.
Right?
And that's why I had to take myself away, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to program my kids with the old beliefs that no longer work for me. And I don't want to have the systemic system where it's like, I'm just doing what I was told and it's not working. It's clearly not working, but here I am relaying information. So I had to pull myself away and deal with that trauma, because you're completely right. Like, you cannot help anyone if you're not helping yourself. And that has been such a valuable lesson. So when I hear people express, always be of service to others, I'm like, well, caution, have you been of service to yourself? Because if you're not, and like you said, mentally, spiritually, like in every aspect, because if you're not around, well, then
I'm not good to anybody else.
Yeah, like how's that going to work, right? So this has been a great lesson for me in terms of being of service to myself before being of service to others. So I'm always very caution. I approach this with a lot of caution when people talk about service to others, and when people call me out for being selfish. Very, very, very vigilant about that. So I'm like, no, I've worked hard to be selfish.
And sometimes that statement is they don't really understand.
Right.
And so like I get it too. Like, what do you mean you're not going to answer this call or work with this client right now? And I'm like, well, I didn't get to take care of the things I need to do, but I need you right now. And I'm like, is it life or death? Okay, fine. But 99% of the time it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
And so to just, say, be a yes person, so to speak, it's kind of tough. And even with Bob, like I remember working with him, he used to charge $55,000 to do like a keynote or speech.
Okay.
And then sometimes he would do it for free. And I'm like, what? Why? And he's like, I just feel like I want to provide that service to this audience, and I don't feel like charging them today because my cup is full. Like, I'm good right now, and they could really benefit from this, and I'm going to do that. Then he used to go to Kingston Penitentiary and do services and lessons for free all the time. And he says, there's certain times where, you will be in that moment of give, but then he'll take that 3 weeks and be alone in his room by himself or traveling by himself.
Right.
And do what he needs to do for him. So I kind of got to see that firsthand, and it really opened my mind to say, man, I really should adopt some of these ideas and beliefs in my own life, because it just seemed like, he had a lot of things figured out.
Well, it's the balance, right? And like I said, that's why you have to recalibrate. We know what's good for you today may not be good for you tomorrow. But the key is your cup has to be filled. And again, in a wholesome way, not in an egotistic way, but in a wholesome way. Like, are your emotional needs taken care of? Are your spiritual needs? Are your mental needs? Are your physical needs? All these things you need to look at. And if they are, then you can engage with being of service to others. But if they're not, I know that when my cups are not filled, you're going to get that, right? Like, if they're 20% filled, well, you're going to get 20% of me. And sometimes it's not the best 20%. And it's funny, my kids will now call me out on stuff. And I'm like, you're right. You know, that's where projection of things come on, where you're unfulfilled, you're unhappy, and you start projecting that onto the world around you. But you'll claim you're being of service to others. Well, it's like, no, we don't want your service. Like, you go away, you know?
Go away, yeah.
So it's such a valuable thing to take care of yourself in a wholesome approach that you can be a healthy individual, like a healthy individual wholesomely. That's really important because you really can't give to others if you're not giving to yourself.
Absolutely not.
So, yeah, I think that's all we have to say about service to others for now.
Of course.
And beliefs. And I would recommend people reading the book, The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. It's so good. And it just explains the science behind the beliefs and how powerful they really are and the value in reprogramming them. And try out my action steps. See if it works for our viewers and journal it and get a sense of what your new beliefs can be. And you're the creator. So you get to decide what those new beliefs look like. No one can tell you. These are your rules you get to make for yourself. So try it out and let us know how it goes.